All right. As people start coming in, I have no special announcements other than please remember on November 6th, which happens to be a big day, we will not be meeting here unless you all need some support. We will be having class online, especially for those people who are in the 200 series of this class, because we'll be putting you in groups for your final project. So there will be an online class on the 6th, unless it's the 7th, and I've just messed up on the date. Voting date is the 6th, right? Election day is the 6th, right?
The 5th.
I mean the 5th. See, I have blacked it out. How about that?
This is just a test.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It is my great pleasure to introduce you this evening to Rohan. We're going to do a bit of some roving introductions because we have some fun speakers this evening. Rohan, who is now 18 years old, totally focused on entrepreneurship, totally excited to be here every single week. It's my pleasure to have you introduce the Dean and our next speaker.
Thank you. How you guys doing today? Not too bad? Okay. So we got a lot of special speakers here today. I'm going to start with Dean Liu. So Dean Liu was born in Ithaca, New York, and raised in San Francisco Bay Area. She earned her bachelor's, master's, and PhD at Stanford. But it's okay.
Okay. It's okay.
Liu,
I'm just previewing.
Liu is a fellow institute of the Electrical and Electronics Engineers. She's an elected member of the National Academy of Engineering and a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors. In addition, she's a board member at Intel Corp and Max Linear Inc. She's also a member of the Industrial Advisory Committee, formed in 2022 to report to the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. So she's important. She does a lot of cool things. She also holds over 94 patents in the area of semiconductor devices and is the co-inventor of the three-dimensional FinFET transistor, which is used in all leading microprocessing chips today. That means every single one of your phones has what she invented inside. Next, I'll be introducing Professor Armando Fox, who's a professor in the Berkeley EECS department. He'll be up on the screen saying a little video to introduce Ben. It's a long chain, but he co-designed and co-taught Berkeley's first massive open online course and serves as a faculty advisor to the MOOC Lab here at Berkeley. He's been a Scientific American Top 50 researcher, an NSF Career Award recipient, a Gilbreth Lecturer and National Academy of Engineering, and an ACM Distinguished Scientist. In a previous life, he helped design the Intel Pentium Pro microprocessor and founded a successful startup to commercialize his UC Berkeley PhD research on mobile computing. For fun, he's also a classically trained musician, performer, and avid musical theater fan. Thank you guys so much, and enjoy today's talk.
All right.
Hi, I'm Armando Fox. I'm a faculty member in electrical engineering and computer science here at Cal Berkeley. And although I am crushed that I cannot be with you in person right now, it is still my great privilege and pleasure to introduce and say a few remarks about today's speaker. This is not today's speaker. This is, of course, hockey legend Wayne Gretzky, who famously said when he was asked about his success, "I skate to where the puck is going to go, not where it has been." Today's speaker, Ben Ling, has very successfully skated many times to where the puck is going to go. And I'm pleased to say that we share over 7 years of history together, starting right in this office, 445 Soda Hall. Let me take you back to 1996. This is a Palm Pilot, the most successful mobile device of its time. Back then, the idea of a pocket-sized mobile device that had wireless access to internet and cloud services, something I'm sure all of you have done multiple times today, was really just a fantasy for most researchers. I was one of those researchers working in this room with a team of PhD students on foundational technologies for mobile applications and cloud computing. Dean Richard Newton, who was a big supporter of game-changing innovation, was a huge supporter of our project. And I'm sure he would be very proud that today's speaker, Ben Ling, was at that time a talented undergrad working in our research group who helped us deploy technology to speed up web browsing for Berkeley students over dial-up modems, which were comparable in speed to emerging wireless services at that time. After graduating in EECS with a minor in business, Ben got into Stanford's PhD program the same year that I was hired there as an assistant professor. I know, sorry. But working together, Ben completed his PhD under my advisorship, working on fault-tolerant storage for cloud computing. But Ben clearly had his eye on the puck, because just a few years into his post-PhD career in industry, he was the director of product for Facebook Platform. Facebook Platform transformed that company's business model and really changed the way that we think about platform applications generally. That's what I call skating to where the puck is going to go. After a string of director of product roles at Google, Ben began the VC portion of his career at Kozla Ventures and later Bling Capital, which has to be the best name ever for a venture capital firm. Ben counts 18 unicorns among his early investments, which is remarkable. And it's tempting to say that he's done so well, I must have been a really good advisor. But the truth is more like what my mentor David Patterson likes to say, which is, there are no losers on a winning team and no winners on a losing team. I'm really proud to have been part of the team atmosphere at UC Berkeley EECS that positions students like Ben to be really successful, and clearly this time it worked. But having said all that, if you have 18 unicorns, that speaks to a real ability to know where the puck is going to go. And so without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce my 7-year student and current colleague. Ben, the floor is yours. Welcome back, and go Bears.
All right, welcome back, Ben. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to ask some initial questions about your time, maybe as a student here, and then basically go quickly through this timeline.
All right.
And then we'll hand it over to the students to ask you a bunch of questions. All right?
Sounds good.
All right, so even by Berkeley's standards, you stand out as a high achiever. So what actually brought you to Berkeley? I'm sure you had other options at that time. And what were you thinking to achieve as a student here when you first arrived?
I came to Berkeley, so I first moved to the United States when I was 3, and my dad was getting his PhD at Berkeley in material science.
Okay.
And then we were here till I was 7, and then I moved back and forth between Taiwan and here, and then I grew up in the Bay Area. And for me, going to Berkeley was kind of a thing that was a foregone conclusion because my dad had spent a lot of time here. And when I applied, at the time, EECS was the hardest major to get into. And you could transition from that major into any other major, but you could not transition in. And so from optionality perspective, that's the degree I chose. And was I really interested in EECS? No. Did I even know what it was? No. But it was just like the optionality argument of choosing the thing that gives you the most optionality and be able to move around. And what was really funny is that in my first year, I really had a hard time because I didn't understand a lot of people already had taken computer science classes and they already started coding. And so now this is common, right? Whereas back then it was much less common, and so I would roam the halls of the computer. Back then there were computer labs. Are there computer labs now?
Yes, still.
Do people even go there anymore?
Yes.
Okay. So I would roam the halls of the computer lab, and I would ask everybody how they did a problem. That's how I figured out the solutions, because I couldn't understand anything, and it was like socially walking around. And the funny thing is, when I was graduating as a senior, all of the people that I worked with, they told me my freshman year, they thought I was so smart because I was done with the assignment that I was just walking around and socializing. Whereas I was really just collecting the answers from everybody. And so, that's kind of like my early path at Berkeley.
Okay, very cool. So keeping your options open. How did you come to work on a project together with Armando?
I don't actually remember. I think it was that, we were doing some research. So one of the classes we did, we were doing this thing called Palm Video, which is that back then there was a Palm Pilot, which is like the early incarnation of the iPhone. And it was just really old and janky and like very, very clunky. But we basically managed so that you could do live streaming, where we literally set up a camera and we had people stand from the camera, and then we streamed the video to the Palm Pilot, which at the time, in 1998 was like quite an invention. And I just remember that's some of the stuff we worked on together.
So do you remember that it was difficult, challenging? I mean, anything that maybe influenced you and helped you during your career subsequently?
Subsequently, from a career standpoint, I mean, I think it's ultimately just like what Armando said, thinking of where the puck is going to be and skating to where the puck is going to be. So for example, streaming video is clearly a thing, it's like obvious now, whereas it was not obvious in 1998.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So then how did you end up going to Stanford? What puck did you see?
So how I ended up at Stanford is that it was also a foregone conclusion that I would just get a PhD because my dad got a PhD. So I really didn't think too much about that during the time. So you know, we looked at Berkeley, looked at Harvard, looked at Stanford, so on and so forth. Harvard, the weather was just really untenable. And then Wisconsin was even more untenable. And Washington was untenable, so it was kind of like either Berkeley or Stanford. And all the Berkeley professors said, go to Stanford, come back afterward. That was like
They
that
were
was the
hoping to
guidance.
have you come back as
Yeah.
perhaps as a faculty member.
Yes, correct. That was more thinking. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how I ended up there.
Okay, and you did very well there. So you were recruited to Google in the very early days, before Google was already a well-known company. So what did you actually do at Google? And what drew you to Google versus the other options you had?
Well, I was super lucky to join Google. So what happened is I was graduate. So the Google story is kind of funny because I was getting a PhD in computer science at Stanford. And at the time, this was in 2003, 2004, and they were losing graduates constantly to Google. They were just like disappearing. They were not graduating. And so I was in the last semester and about to graduate. And so I was job searching, and I had an offer from McKinsey. And I thought that I wanted to work in business, so I wanted to work at McKinsey. And I ran to a friend at a bar, and he said, hey, you should interview at Google. We are looking for technical people that are interested in business. And I was like, okay, I don't know. And so I went and interviewed, and I had 13 interviews. And every single one of them, the people were magnetic. They were like alive, and they were very interested in what they were working on, and they were fast. They were just really, really fun, interesting people. Whereas at McKinsey, it was like, I will be here for another 3 years. I will be engagement manager, and then I will go be a senior executive at another company. So nobody loved their job at McKinsey. Everybody loved their job at Google. So it was purely like pure luck that I ended up at Google because I chose based off of the people and their passion. So I was just a PhD student, so I had no idea what their economics were. We had no idea how much money they were making. We had no idea what the stock price would be. So at the time, that's how I landed there. And I was very lucky because I said, this is March or January of 2004, I said, I'm going to start after my PhD is done. Okay? So then what happened is the VP of product at the time, Jonathan Rosenberg, he said to me, no, Ben, you're starting next week, and you'll thank me later. I was like, okay, I'm starting next week. So I start next week, and I start working there. And then what happens is, the Stanford Dean of Computer Science finds out and is not happy. So he sends Google an email that says, Ben is a current PhD student at Stanford. He is not allowed to work more than 8 hours a day. So 8 hours a week per university guidelines. So I was like, uh-oh, I have to stop my work here. But the Google are pretty clever. So they have they have HR send them an email that says, Ben Ling is not required to work more than 8 hours a week. But I got my PhD anyway, I finished it, and it was really, really fortuitous because at that time, Google was growing like a hockey stick, right? And so I started the commerce group, which includes checkout, product search, wallet, and shopping, so all the commerce products, processing billions of dollars in transactions. And so it was really kind of luck that brought me there, and I was kind of lucky in the right place, right time. So Eric Schmidt, who's also a Berkeley grad, he was the CEO of Google for a very long time, and he says, when you're offered a seat on the rocket ship, don't ask what seat, just get on. And so at the time, I didn't recognize that it was a rocket ship, but after the first year, I recognized it because you saw the stock and you saw the company, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was
so a lot of luck.
Fortuitous.
Yeah, a lot of luck.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of right place, right time.
But you sensed something that was really something happening, like the company was moving, going places, right?
Yeah, I think the thing here is that at the time when I interviewed at Google, it was clear to me that these people were very smart and also very passionate about what they were working on. And that if it all didn't work out, it would be this sort of this pollen effect, right? Where you go to school, you go to Berkeley, and then you meet all these people, and then they all end up somewhere else, right? Similarly, if you go to grad school, the same thing happens. And then at Google, it actually did happen in the sense that it did work out for everybody, and everybody who stayed there and everybody who left. But then the network is explosive, like 10x that of university.
Now, is there anything here that our students could relate to that a Google product today, like that you provided the foundational contributions for?
Yeah, so all the payments, all the payments work, all the commerce, product search, if you're searching for a product on Google, all that stuff is the work that I did. If you use YouTube and any of the monetization, I worked on that.
Wow.
And the partnership and the music, like YouTube Music was on my team. So all the videos, a lot.
That's a
and all the
lot.
search products, the images, the video,
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's right there on the slide. And actually, Armando forgot to mention that you've then worked at Facebook, right? Facebook.
That's right.
Lured you away, and then you ended up working at
YouTube.
back at YouTube. I
Yeah.
mean, Google because of YouTube.
Correct.
So tell us about those stages of your career.
Yeah, so again, like the Facebook transition was also lucky in the sense that I had a friend who was at Facebook, and he had come to have lunch with me at Google, and he said, "Hey, have you thought about working at Facebook?" And I was like, "No, not really. Why do you ask?" And he says, "Well, we're hiring, like we're growing very quickly, and Facebook platform. We just launched Facebook platform, and Facebook platform at the time was basically a developer platform that allowed people to develop applications on Facebook, and then you basically access all of the users very quickly. So your apps could grow very, very quickly. It was the early version of Facebook Connect in the sense that Facebook Connect, you can connect in, you can log in using your Facebook identity anywhere on the web, and then you could invite your friends. And so it was, again, fortuitous. I went and chatted with the people, and I thought it was really interesting. And so at the time, it was 40 million monthlies, roughly, users, and it was growing like, I could see how the college students would expand to the nearest neighbor, and then just continue to expand from there. And so, I ended up at Facebook. And then Google came to try to hire me back, roughly, like very shortly thereafter. And YouTube at the time was the number 3 or number 4 most trafficked website in the world.
Wow.
And so they said, "Hey, we need some help at YouTube. Will you come back?" And I said, "Okay."
So not that much time at Facebook.
About,
relatively
yeah,
speaking.
just roughly
Only
a year.
a year.
Roughly a year, yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're a director of YouTube partnerships, content,
Yeah.
and platform. That
Yeah.
is a lot. Yeah. So how did you make the transition to go into VC, the VC world, Khosla, starting with Khosla Ventures?
Yeah. So I invested personally for about 7 years or so when I was at Google and Facebook and YouTube. So I invested all of the money that I had made at Google into friends' companies. And so it was roughly 85 companies, roughly about $6 million or more. And it was kind of like, if we were students, if we were colleagues and you were starting a company, then I would try to put $50,000 to $100,000 in that company. And so that's initially how I got started as an angel investor. And Vinod had called me many times to join. And many times I said, now is not the time. But in 2013, it was a good time. Yeah.
That's great. And like the unicorns that Professor Fox mentioned that you've invested in, were any of them did you invest them as an angel or more as a VC?
All of the above, and
Really?
and in the seed stage, so like in the
Wow.
very earliest stages.
So you
like
really
for-
could see, you have this foresight to see like which companies really can scale and have impact.
I think
That's
there's
amazing.
some of that, but then
That's
there's
really
also
amazing.
a lot of luck involved.
I think there must be something to increase your chances of good luck, right? So
There are
maybe
chances.
that's
You
kind
have to
of
work
a-
hard. You have to work extremely hard,
Okay, working hard.
and then you have to create your own luck. Yeah.
So how, maybe a little bit more detail. How do you think that you've been able to create your own luck?
I think okay. So one of the questions that that people asked me, and I think you guys asked me in advance, was, what are the skills that you learned at Berkeley that became applicable later on in life and like hugely applicable? And so one of the skills that I applied at Berkeley, so I learned this from my dad. So he said the following to me. He said, "Ben, are you doing all of the problems in your physics book?" And I was like, "No freaking way am I doing all the problems in the physics book. Are you crazy?" He's like, you need to do all of the problems in the physics book. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so, but then he was like, oh, you know, if you get straight A pluses, I'll give you $1,000 for like as a bonus. I was like, okay. And so I actually took his advice and I did all of the problems in the physics textbook. All of, because usually you only assign like 5 problems and they're all the other ones. And like nobody does all the other ones. But as it turns out in life, most people are lazy, including professors. So what they do is they take the questions that are not assigned and then put them on the midterm with a different number, with different variables. So I'm like, I show up at the midterm, I'm like, oh, I did this problem, I did this problem, I did this problem, I did this problem. And so showing up prepared is like crazy in terms of your trajectory of success. When I interviewed at Google, so several of my Google interviewers told me, oh, you were the first person I ever gave a perfect score to. Well, you know what I did before I went to the interview at Google? I asked all my friends who had interviewed at Google, what did they ask you? And they said, here are the questions. I said, okay, great. Let me make sure that I'm prepared for those questions. Similarly, in business, when you show up to a meeting, you better be ready with the key questions and the key asks and all of the things. Did that make sense? This is just life of like being prepared and being able to predict what the person is going to ask you and then being able to have the answers ready so that you basically accelerate the conversation. And so this was one of the key learnings that my dad taught me, which I thought was crazy at the time and like was a pain in the ass, but then it turns out to be actually extremely, extremely beneficial. And it's basically like if I have one cheat sheet for like getting good grades in undergrad, it's like literally do all the problems in the book. And then if you don't know how to do them, show up to the office hours and ask how to do them. Right? And then you sort of work through it, and then you learn, and then you learn, and you learn, and you learn, and then you're like, I know how to do this, I know how to do this, I know how to do this. And it is weird, but I think there's a large component of life, of success, that is that, just like showing up prepared.
All right. So that's the secret for creating luck.
Well, I know that's the secret for creating luck, but I think that basically increases
figured.
your chances of getting a yes in many situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? If you show up unprepared, you basically have to like tap dance on your feet.
Yeah, that's true. Fantastic. Any other advice we have for students here who might be interested to form their own startups? Just like, do you have advice for entrepreneurial students here?
Yeah, I think there's 2. The first is you have to think about really large. So if you're creating a venture scale startup, then number 1 is the market size has to be sufficiently large, meaning it's got to be a large, large market. And the second thing is thinking about some durability, in the sense that, like, what is your comparative advantage or durable advantage that allows you to endure competition over time? And so a lot of entrepreneurs will start companies thinking that this is a really interesting product or a really interesting business, but they don't think through, like, is the market large enough? And then number 2, like, is it durable? In the sense that if there's 3 other competitors, 7 other competitors, how do you endure that competition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. Fantastic. Okay, so now you've been an angel investor as well as a VC, and then you founded your own VC firm, Bling.
Yeah.
Wonderful name there. And you run the venture fund with Kyle, who's a fellow Cal alum. So how do you all decide what to invest in? Like, obviously, startup entrepreneurs who exhibit the characteristics you just said, but anything else? Your secret to success? Having 18 unicorns.
Well, it's 2 main things. So we invest at the earliest stages, meaning that it can be just like a team with an idea. Wow. There's no product, there's no users, there's nothing. And so we look for 2 main things. The first is really talented entrepreneurs, and then number 2 is really large markets. So in terms of really talented entrepreneurs, what do we look for? Number 1, high IQ, EQ. Number 2, mentally tough and resilient. Number 3, stubborn, but not too stubborn that they can't take good feedback when they hear it. So that's kind of the general shape of, great founder. And then the second is a very, very large growing market. And so we typically find that the founders many times will pivot. They will like, this thing didn't work, this thing didn't work, this thing didn't work. You got to keep pivoting. So having that mental toughness and resilience and then a high IQ, EQ, being able to navigate in a very large market is critical.
All right, makes good sense. So my last question before I open it up, what do you see in terms of investment opportunities in the next few years and maybe even out to 10 years?
I think it's really broad. I think it's really broad. Obviously, everybody thinks that there's the AI applications, and I think everyone understands that there's a broad application of AI. However, I think there's just opportunities in a lot of places. There's sleepy businesses. For example, there's CRM businesses, there's procurement businesses, there's like accounting business, there's all sorts of really large companies that are old and stodgy. So my colleague Keith Raboy likes to say, go look at the largest companies in the world that have really bad NPS scores, meaning that like people really don't like them. And then you can see what they do, and then you can pick them off one by one, and then build the next generation. So I think there's just opportunity everywhere. And as a fund, we are opportunistic, meaning that we basically look at opportunities. We just look at, is this a great entrepreneur? Is this a really large market? And we're open-minded.
Okay. Actually, I wanted to ask one more question.
Yeah.
So once somebody starts a company, how do they choose which investors to take funding from, right?
I think that's a really important question because a lot of founders, what they oftentimes do is they say, who can give me the highest price? Which I think is a real mistake. So put differently, everybody here chose to come to Berkeley. They probably could have gone to University of Phoenix online. It's cheaper, right? But the network is not the same, the product is not the same, the degree is not the same, so on and so forth. And so just like in choosing a university, choosing a partner, an investor is really important in the sense that you want to choose the partner that's going to be with you for a long period of time, going to be able to be a value add partner, not just like the cheapest option. The cheapest option meaning that, oh, they can offer me, they can offer me $2 million for 5% of my company rather than $2 million for 10% of my company. Like the 5% is cheaper, but you kind of get what you pay for most of the time. And so making sure that you choose the right partner who's going to be with you for 5, 7, 10 years is vitally important.
Great advice. Okay, let's open it up to questions from the audience. I have more questions in case. Yeah, fantastic.
Just maybe stand up even and introduce yourself.
Excellent.
Okay. Hello. My name is Innocent. I am an exchange student here at Cal. And the question that I have is, if someone wanted to get in touch with your particular VC, early stage company, in the line to build the first MVP, what would be the best way to get to approach your VC and to get to pitch their business for funding?
You just send me an email. It's bling at blingcap.com.
Okay, thanks
and
for
we
that.
can provide it to everybody afterward. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Hello. My name is Omar, and you mentioned your time at Google where you specifically joined because you saw a group of almost highly motivated people that were passionate about the product. Do you think that was one of the most crucial points at Google? And what specifically at your time at Google did you realize, what made it succeed, would you say?
Google.
Okay, so there's two questions in that. On the second one, what made Google succeed? It was so there's a company answer and then there's sort of a real answer over time. So the company answer is that just a much, much better product in the sense that at the time, if you typed in a search, we gave you the right answers very, very quickly and we directed you to another site and got your query done as fast as possible. Faster than 8, 9, 10 other search engines. And so over time, it became your reliable, trusted resource to the front gate to the internet. What makes Google durable is the monopoly that it has, or the network effect that it has on search and ads, in the sense that when you have all the searchers, all the advertisers want to advertise, right? Because that's where all the eyeballs are. But if you have all the advertisers, they fill in for all of your poor search results. So if you don't have good search results for certain products, the advertisers will show up because it's an opportunity to acquire a customer. And so that sort of network effect, and then also having that network effect, but then also taking the ads and then distributing them everywhere on the web through AdSense. So when you go to a blog and you see all those ads, they're powered by Google, right? So that whole thing, the network effect, is extremely strong at Google. And so that's actually the core thing that works at Google. And that's the money printing machine.
Lots of questions. This is great.
In here? Can you pass it? Sorry.
Hi, my name is Romaine and I'm studying Entrepreneurship and Technology at UC Berkeley. And I had a question because you say that the most important thing to invest in a startup was the team. So I was wondering what is the most important for a team, like the ideal team, in terms of numbers, soft and hard skills? Thank you.
That's a really good question. So a couple of things. Number one, so the question for everybody is like, what's an ideal team for investor? And so number one common misconception is that we have to have a complete team. The answer is that no, you don't have to have a complete team. Typically, if you show up with even a partial team, but you have a really great partial team, it is better than having a complete team with people that are bad. Does that make sense? Oftentimes people think, oh, well, I need to have somebody to cover go-to-market, or I need to have somebody cover engineering because we're non-technical. And so you get somebody, but they're bad. So to the investor, that's not a good thing because that means that they've got to get you to get rid of that person, right? Versus just having a partial team, that's great. And so then number two, what's great? So great is different to different investors, and there's many forms of great that emerge over time. They're not all one pattern, but typically it's like the things that I said, like high IQ, high EQ. High IQ because they've got to be able to understand complex business problems. High EQ because you always have to be recruiting. You always have to be selling. You always have to be doing partnerships. You have to be raising money. So you have to be able to read the counterparty in terms of like, how do I get the thing that I need to get done, okay? Then there's the mentally tough and resilient part of it. And this is really, really important because being an entrepreneur is exceedingly hard in the sense that it's lonely. You have very few people you can talk to about your problems because you can't talk to your direct reports about your problems because you're trying to make sure that they're motivated. You don't want to talk to, a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking to their investors about their like a lot of the problems or what they're feeling because they're like, we need the investors to feel like we have it under control so they'll give us more money over time. And most of the time, the thing doesn't work. Whatever you're doing, most of the time, it doesn't work. So you've got to pick yourself up, go do something, like iterate on it. Does that make sense? So the mentally tough and resilient part is extremely important. And then the stubborn part of it is also very important in the sense that you've got to be stubborn to go try something that seems incredibly hard or impossible and keep trying until you've figured it out or you're like, okay, I don't think it's figure-outable. But not so stubborn that you can't take good feedback when you hear it. Because there's certain types of businesses. For example, if you're launching a local business, meaning you're targeting local businesses, and you're going to go sign local businesses up, one of the known things is that it's hard to sign local businesses up. Why? Because you usually have to go door to door, or you call them, but you call them in either one of these situations, can I talk to the owner? Sorry, the owner's not here. Call back later. Right? So you wasted that time. So it's like very hard to, so that's one of the things of, the stubborn part is like when you hear good feedback, like, oh, this is a problem with local businesses generally, you have to have some sort of insight of, I have a creative way to acquire these businesses, therefore I'm different, or gee, I have no creative way, this is going to be a problem. So let me think about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
I'm just curious, so these characteristics of a winning team that you would invest in, like how do you determine if they have the IQ and EQ? Like what question or questions do you ask them to determine this?
The IQ, EQ question is like, it's very, very subtle and it's dependent upon each investor and their spidey sense. Typically it is, so for us, we typically index on, number one, has this person done something great before? That just tells you a little bit. That's not always the case. That's the first thing. So at Google, we would oftentimes, like in an interview panel, we'd say, oh, was this person a prior Olympian? Right? Or are they number one in their class? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just that mentality. But the IQ, EQ thing oftentimes is in the conversation, are you able to understand the question that's being asked, the question behind the question, and then be able to answer it succinctly, right? Because one of the most common things that entrepreneurs do is the following. You'll ask a question like this: what are we having for dinner tonight? And naturally, people will do the following. Well, I got in my car and I drove to the grocery store. I showed up at Safeway, and then I walked the produce aisle, and I saw the tomatoes weren't very good. So then I went to the meat section, and I bought some chicken, and then da-da-da-da-da-da-da, where the answer was just, we're having chicken tonight. You see that? So that's typically one of the major failure cases in a lot of entrepreneurs raising money from venture capitalists, is that people ask a very simple question, like, oh, we're having pizza, versus like the whole long narrative of like, how do you, so that's another thing of the EQ aspect of it. Can you understand the question that's being asked and be able to answer it very concisely? But then typically, there's also like, does this person have unique insight about a market, right? And the product and the users associated there. And then are they qualified? Like, what makes them qualified to do the thing that they're saying?
Got it, their value proposition. Excellent, okay, next question.
That's exactly the question I wanted to ask. So I can give the mic to someone else. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jem. I'm a third-year business and data science student. I actually have two questions for you. First of all, what's the main common advice that you give to your startups in your portfolio? And the second one is, if you were to start a business yourself today, what would that be? What will be the industry?
Okay, I think I heard the question. I think number one was, what is the advice that you give to most?
Yeah, what's like the common advice that you give to your portfolio companies?
Okay, so the question of like, what's the common advice that I give to portfolio companies? I would say there's two main vectors. Vector one is that as a company, you want to be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. Learn-it-all meaning that you're going to learn the thing very quickly. And does that make sense? So you basically, if you don't know how to do something, find the best people in the, like, who are the 1 to 5 best people in the world at that thing, and then go figure out a path to them, go talk to them, learn what great is, and then have them help you hire or learn that skill. So it's kind of like that's one of the most important things in terms of building a company. It's no different than building a great team anywhere else. It's like, how do you get the best people and at X? Well, you go talk to the best people at X, and then they can help you find those other people, or they can teach you how to become that. That's number one. And the second thing is that raising a lot of money does not mean that you've made it. And in particular, we have a phrase of, you have to earn the right to burn more. So what that means is, typically in a company, let's say we start a company. There's 5 of us. Okay, let's say that our payroll, like we pay ourselves $100,000 a year roughly, and so the payroll is roughly like $40,000 a month, roughly like $50,000 a month. Okay, but oftentimes people are like, oh, we just raised $5 million, so now we can pay everybody more. But the answer is like, you haven't proven anything. All you did was get some more money. Versus if it's 5 people and we've built the product, we launched the product, now we have a bunch of customers, we have $500,000 in ARR, and so we've proven that there's some demand for our product, we have some degree of product market fit, therefore now we have the right to burn more, we can hire more people. Oftentimes people think, oh, I raised $5 million, now I'm going to hire all these people. It's a disaster. You end up with all these people, your core thing doesn't yet work, and then you got to let all the people go when you're running out of money, and you run out of money faster, because more salaries means more people, more mouths, more salary, more burn, less money over time. So that's kind of like the framework that we use.
Yeah, I've seen that. I like that. Learn it all. That's good.
Hi, Ben. My name is Selim, and I had a question concerning a career in VC. Would you advise starting our career in VC? And if not, as a business student, where to go?
This is a common question that's asked, and the answer is that there's no single path. You can be successful either way. So when I was sitting in these seats, I was told, you should be a VC late in your career because it is more rewarding. I now understand what that means. When I sat in the chairs, I was like, you just don't want more VCs. Like, you just don't want competition. The reality is that VC sounds very glamorous and sounds very fun, but as an early stage career, it is a pain in the ass. And it is very, very stressful when you are when you're early in your career in VC. Why? Okay, so in an operating role, if you're a product manager, you're an engineer, as an engineer, you can develop your product, you launch the product, it works, you see that you've done it, right? You get instant feedback. Do I have lots of users? Okay, the team sees that you did it, you get promoted. You get promoted, you see your path up, right? Similarly as a product manager. However, in VC, it's very, very opaque, meaning that you may champion an investment at your firm, and then 2 years later, maybe you'll raise a Series A. Maybe it won't. Maybe 5 years later, you'll raise a Series B, Series C, right? And then maybe it goes to 0. So the feedback cycle is extremely long, and so it's really stressful for a lot of the early stage. So one of the most complex things is the early stage general partners at VC firms have this weird angst, because unless they've already made money and been successful elsewhere, they're worried about getting fired. And they're like, is my company doing well? And so they do unnatural things to try to make the company do well, if that makes sense. Because if you can't, as an investor, you don't go and control the operations of the company. Like, good investors understand that. The really annoying investors are like, let me show up and help you. Like they get into the weeds a little too much, right? And so as an early stage, it can be very, very, very stressful. But it can work. There's people that do it and become very successful over time. It just depends on what you like. And if you have an inclination to build products and to launch products, you should absolutely go do that first. There's no right answer.
I have a question. Hello, my name is Rodrigo, and I was wondering, what are the biggest challenges you have seen unicorns face as they transition from a startup to a larger and more mature company?
So one of the the major challenges associated with the transition from a startup to a larger company is I literally call this like the phase shift. So oftentimes, if it's just 4 of us starting a company and we've built a product and it kind of works and we got customers, now we have $1 million in revenue, we've expanded the team to 8 people, let's say. Okay, and basically the CEO knows everything that's going on. All the team members kind of know what's going on. But there comes a phase where the CEO can't know everything that's going on. You need to you need to phase shift into becoming a company where you have really talented leaders who are 10x better than you at all the respective functions. And you've been able to hire them because you're not egotistical and have to be the best, smartest person in the room. And figuring out how to phase shift from basically a product into a company, and how does that machine work if you show up, if you go on vacation for 2 weeks, the company keeps running, right? So figuring out that phase shift is actually one of the biggest challenges. And so part of that is just hiring really talented people, number one. Number two is that you should have the right investors around the table, or the right advisors that have seen the paths before of how do you make sure that you can navigate that phase shift successfully.
Thanks.
Over here.
Yeah, hello, my name is Amin. I'm a graduate student in business, and just wanted to ask, what is your advice to find the best early stage startups to work for when you graduate?
That's a really good question. So when you graduate, you typically want to choose pretty carefully where you go. Not because you can make a mistake. It's fine. You can just change, especially early in your career. But typically, what you do is the following. If you want to go in an early stage startup, then go look at the Midas list, which is the published best performing VCs on Forbes, and go look at the early stage companies or the early stage firms, and then see who they've invested in. Does that make sense? And then so use that path, use the graph of who has done well, who is doing well, who is emerging, right? Not just who's done well historically, but who is doing well in recent times. And then go look at those companies, and that's one path. And then if you want to join a later stage company, which is generally, I think, a little bit better for oftentimes, new grads, because you don't have enough work experience to basically, I think there's still some training that can be done. then you go look for the Series C, Series D companies that are backed by the major VCs. And then you basically, if you can get contacts and ask your friend graph. I mean, if you're in the business school, then you should be able to find people that are deep within the industry and say, like, is that a real company? Or is that like a myth? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rohan. I'm a first-year business student. And you've worked for a lot of companies that have shaped like our generation's history, like Facebook, YouTube, Google, all of these we use currently. And I'm curious, what, under these leaders like Mark Zuckerberg or the CEO of YouTube and Google, what have they done that's been successful, and what are the qualities as leaders that we or I can apply to myself and learn to be like them?
That is a good question. So I think there is a question around whether the inherent business models are so strong that it could have been somebody else. Did that make sense? Obviously, these people all had really good product vision. They hired very well. They were maniacal about execution. So all of these things are true. But the companies that you mentioned, so like YouTube, the key insight at YouTube at the time, because there was Google Video. You guys are too young to remember this. But there was Google Video, and people thought, well, why would Google Video not beat YouTube? Okay, the answer was all the product, meaning that when you upload a video onto YouTube, within minutes, it's processed, and you can share that video with somebody else. But Google Video was hindered by lawyers that said, oh, if Rohan uploads a video, what if it's a pornographic video, or what if it is a like copyrighted video? We can't show that. There has to be content review. Well then, no one wants to upload a video to a video service that takes hours or days for your video to process, because you can't share it. So the network effect, right? Does that make sense? And so understanding the network effect there and like the speed, how speed really matters, basically more videos, more viewers, more viewers, more videos, like, right? Does that make sense? So when you hinder the network effect, it doesn't work. Similarly with Facebook, you have this huge network effect of like real identity, and you invite all your friends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the network effects in these businesses are very, very strong. And so there is a key question of, when we evaluate companies, we say, is this a monkey's business, or is this an execution business? The monkey's businesses are the network effect businesses, because even monkeys can operate them. When you look at the companies like eBay, like, does anybody here use eBay? Do you guys even know what eBay is? Who knows what eBay is? Oh, this is crazy. You guys don't know what eBay is. Okay, but I mean, eBay is like a monkey's business, right? It's like, if you look at, they were the leading company in commerce early on, right? But like eBay's still a huge company because of the network effect. Who here knows what Craigslist is? Right, like that product is really shitty, right? And it's like the network effect is so strong, right? So there's certain core elements of certain businesses where the network effect is so strong, monkeys can operate it. But then there's businesses like Uber and DoorDash, which are like execution businesses, because boy, the competition is fierce, right? Like everything, and Amazon is an execution business too in the beginning.
I guess so. Following up, then in sort of like these execution-based businesses, what qualities in the leaders, like as you worked at Khosla and now your own firm, when you find these VCs, or sorry, these founders, I know you covered like your topics, but what exactly is it that they carry with them that allows them to like bring this product from nothing to something, you know, on top of resilience? I understand like it takes a lot of resilience, but there's got to be like an underlying fire behind all of that as well. So like when
Correct.
you meet someone, like how do you identify that fire, and like what is it that all these successful people share in common as leaders?
A lot of the successful people share like the following traits, like the ones that we talked about, but in addition, they have a chip on their shoulder. They're unhappy about something. They're unhappy because like they have this need to prove something. So for example, rippling, do people here know what rippling is? Who here knows what rippling is? Okay, so a lot less people. So they do hundreds of millions in revenue. So they basically, companies historically had an HR department and an IT department, and they didn't talk to each other. So when you joined a company, the HR people would give you a number, the IT people would like give you your laptop, et cetera, and they were all separate systems. But that's just dumb, because like you're one person, there's one company. So Rippling says, well, we treat you as a person, and then like if you're joining the engineering department, well, you should automatically have a laptop shipped to you, and you should be automatically in the access control list for engineering, so on and so forth. Parker, this is his third company. His second company was Zenefits, which was like huge, like ramp up, and then like basically, a disaster. And he had a huge chip on his shoulder saying that like, I need to prove that I'm good, et cetera, et cetera. And so I backed him again, and so far it's working out really, really well. So oftentimes there's that element of, there's like the insecurity thing, but that's not necessarily the case. That's usually for first-time founders. For second and third-time founders, it's just like this deep passion and mission that they're like, we're just gonna do this, we're gonna figure it out. And the other thing is that it's tricky in a lot of these businesses because people that know a lot about the industry usually know what all the problems are, so they're not foolish enough to try it. So PayPal was built by people who knew nothing about payments because they were foolish enough to be like, we're just gonna transfer money. Does that make sense? And so like, a lot of it is actually, you just have to, for an investor, the answer is we don't know, we guess. We make a best guess. And we have to make 30, 40 of them in a fund and then help them navigate the waters. Because if you knew, then venture capital would be very easy. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Marius. I study computer science, and yeah, thanks for sharing your insights on how you decide on whether to invest in startups or founders. And I was wondering, like, what do you do when founders you have invested in lose motivation to build their product? Or like, how do you see early on in founders whether they will keep their motivation on building like a great product, even when like things like failing is involved and everything that can prevent you from staying motivated to build something?
Okay. So 2 questions there is like, how do you help founders that are losing motivation? And then number 2 is how do you guess that they may be motivated in the first place? The second one is easier to answer in the sense that you just look at their history and their past of what they've done historically. Like I said, like at Google, we would look at whether somebody was an Olympian. So someone who's an Olympian has failed many, many times. And they just show up to practice. When they don't feel like it, they show up to practice. They just gotta just do it. Right? And similarly, people, believe it or not, that get straight A's at Berkeley, they just do it. In the sense that like, oh God, like this is a pain in the ass, but they just do it. And so there's an aspect of like, you just kind of have to drive through the wall. Other times you can sense it in their personality, that they're just like not gonna give up, in the sense that they're just dogged. In terms of like, what do we do when we run into founders that lose motivation? It's 2 separate branches. Branch 1 is like, if the founder has temporarily lost motivation, it is easy to address in the sense that, but you have to look at the causes of the loss of motivation. Whether if it's like the product is really not working, then they should like, and they've tried all the things they can think of and all the things that we can think of and everything that everyone else can think of, they should lose motivation in the sense that maybe I should do something else. Does that make sense? So sometimes you have to know when to call it quits on something. You might be too early, you might be wrong, you simply move. Or if it's like you need to raise money. Sometimes founders lose motivation when they're raising money because they get so many no's. But part of it is just like head up. So we've had situations where founders are like, they said, Ben, I don't think I can do it anymore. Like I got like 40 no's. I'm like, you just need 1 yes. You just need 1 yes. And so that's oftentimes the case. And like people can pick their heads back up and like, we just make more introductions and just keep going. And so it's kind of a hard answer because then there's the other branch, which is that they don't want to do it anymore. If they don't want to do it anymore, they don't want to do it anymore. And as a good partner, you have to recognize when somebody doesn't want to do it anymore versus try to force them to keep doing it. It's just going to build resentment. So it's just kind of like, okay, well, if you don't want to do it, should we just shut down the company? Should we sell the company? What should we do? Because there's moments in time when you're like this founder's out, and there's no point. It's just reputationally damaging and brand damaging to be like, no, you have to keep going. Like it doesn't help anybody.
When do you know that like a moment like this has come? Like, what happens and like how do you detect in a founder that he has really lost motivation and doesn't want to continue? and it's not like only they've failed many times in the past and they just need this one yes.
I think everybody knows it.
Okay, so it's just like.
I mean, I think when I say that, I'm not being facetious.
Right.
I think everybody knows. Like the team knows it, the founder knows it, the investor knows it, right? Because like, it is pretty hard. It's like being the CEO of a startup or a founder. You have the front on the entire time, but when you lose the front, like and if you don't have the motivation, it is exhausting to pretend that you have the motivation to all the people that you're working with. And I think people can figure that out. Does that make sense? It's part of like the reading of people.
Okay.
But it's okay. Like in startups, like I think one of the things that people think through is that, oh, well, I got a degree from Berkeley, so my next job has to be the perfect job, and then the next job has to be the perfect job, and the next job has to be the perfect job, so my resume looks perfect. It doesn't matter. So Vinod has a saying that like it doesn't really matter when you fail because people only remember when you succeed. So Vinod Khosla is like one of the best VCs like in history. And he was the founder of Sun. But before that, he had like these companies that didn't work. Nobody remembers those companies. Travis is the founder of Uber. Everybody knows Uber. Nobody knows his failed company from before. So, it's your successes that matter.
Right. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Ignacio. I'm a master's student in civil engineering. And I just saw this profile on you that kind of funny listed notable exits. And it got me curious, just as a cautionary tale, what do you think are the signs in companies or anything to look out for or to be aware that tell you that they're going to fail or they're just not going in the right direction?
There's so many. So number one, when the company starts lowering its hiring bar, it's one of the earliest signs of the beginning of the end. Okay, so the hiring bar goes like this. So at Google, we had a saying that you should only hire A players because B players hire C players, right? Because the B players want to be secure and make sure that they feel smart. So they don't want to hire anybody who's smarter than they are or better than they are. They hire C players. So that's kind of like the beginning and the end. The other thing that is very unpopular to say, but I think has become okay to say in recent years, is that work-life balance is a myth. It does not exist. Everything in life comes with choices. Either you're studying or you're playing or whatever. Put differently, the simple analogy that we give is that suppose we're playing chess. You are a grandmaster. I am a novice. But if I get to move 2 times or 3 times, every time you get to move, there's a probability that I'm going to beat you, even though you are a grandmaster and I know nothing, right? Because I've moved so many times. And so the fact is that similarly in life, if you are working and you're moving and you're iterating much faster than your competition, you will outpace them dramatically. And so like this whole work-life balance, there was a time when that's what it was all about. Industry was like, oh, work-life balance, work-life balance. But it's a myth. It's a myth. It doesn't exist in startups. And when that starts to happen at the companies, it's the beginning of the end of that culture. Does that make sense? So like Google, so put differently, a lot of the companies are still very successful because they have monopolies or they have network effects. And over time you've built, or you have brands and lock-in of some sort, right? But as soon as you sort of, if you're in a very competitive, commoditized market, you can't rely on those things.
Okay.
Hi there, my name is Nicholas. I'm an undergrad studying math. And my question is, I'm not entirely sure how to define it, but I'm pretty sure I want to go into the more deep tech space, like research-heavy stuff, where I can like do actual research. What would you say would be logical or fitting next steps after a bachelor's? Because it seems like I'm not sure whether I'm ready to go into the deep tech space directly. Yeah, what's your thoughts on this?
So if you're graduating with a degree in math and you are going to work in deep tech, I would suggest that you just go right away. And so there's many paths for that. Path one is that if this is like a middle stage company in the Series C, Series D type of deep tech company, use the network, use the Berkeley network, use the friend network, use the family network, so on and so forth, and find paths to it. And then, or if you don't have any paths, find the investors and then like ask to be introduced to them. Does that make sense? Create your path. And then find the roles that they're hiring for, if any, and if they're not, then you still try to find roles there. In most companies, a degree in math is employable in a lot of different functions. It's much more, so for example, I mean, this is not, I don't think this is controversial to say, like a degree in math is much more employable in a lot of the deep tech companies than a degree in English. English, right? Because like just the translatability of the skills.
Is it working?
Hi.
Do you hear me?
I can
okay,
hear you,
perfect. My name is Justine. I'm a neuroscience major at Berkeley. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Hi, my name is Justine. I'm a neuroscience major at Berkeley. I'm also president of Girls into VC at Berkeley, aspiring biotech VC. I advise a lot of student founders here, and they always ask me, should I drop out when I start raising my seed? Like, seriously fun? And 80 to 90% of VCs I've asked this question to say, yes, you should drop out at some point. What's your opinion on that?
Well, like I think it's a very personal question. And like I said earlier, work-life balance is a myth. School-work balance is a myth. You can choose, right? Every moment that you spend on something else is a moment that you're not spending on that other thing. And so it just depends on whether you're all in and whether the market's competitive or so on and so forth. Does that make sense? It's pretty clear. It's just choices. Like people have to make choices. You can't have it all.
Thank you very much. The question in the back? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Noor. I'm a data science and cognitive science major. You spoke a lot about the skills that you think are very important for founders, but you also said two conflicting things that I wanted some clarification on. So you said it's important to be very knowledgeable in your field and in your space, but you also said that there needs to be a little bit of naivety when it comes to going into something like the PayPal situation. What do you think you can, like, what is the ideal balance in that situation? Or how can you strike that perfect middle line?
So I don't think we expect you to have a lot of knowledge about a specific industry. It's better if there's founder market fit, meaning that there's some degree of founder authenticity to that market. Sometimes you'll see like, an entrepreneur, you'll see a bunch of men, and then they're like, oh, we're launching this women's health product. And they don't have a story of why it is important to them and like why they're qualified or why it's important. Does that make sense? It's like, so you're like wondering like, why are they doing this thing and why are they uniquely qualified to do a women's health product versus, for example, a bunch of other potential founders. So there's that aspect to it. So I don't think we expect you to be like fully knowledgeable of an area, but you have to be able to be, there has to be good founder market fit, meaning that the story needs to make sense, that there's a match there, and then you have to have the capability or the demonstration that you can learn very quickly. Because we expect you to go up the scale in terms of the sophistication much faster than anybody else in the industry. But we don't expect you to start with a high intercept.
I think we have time for one more student question. Make it a good one, no pressure.
Oh, okay, perfect. Hi, thanks again for answering another of my questions. So my question was, you spoke on how building teams, for example, when you're founding a company. And I was curious as to like, you said like a less complete team is more important than a complete team, correct? But within like that team, should all parts essentially know, like, for example, if I have like a co-founder that's more technical and more technicality than me and more like outreach side, should I know and learn the technicality of it first before, or should I just kind of go forward and just have the trust in him to handle that side correctly?
Okay, so the question here is, when assembling a team, should you learn the skills associated with the other parts of the team, or should you trust the other players on those skills? And the answer is, it depends. So there's no single right answer here. If you think you will be world-class at that thing because you have enough insight or you have this self-delusional view that I'm going to be world-class at this, then you do want to learn the thing. But if you realize that there's no way in the world I'm ever going to be better at Java programming or JavaScript than this person, then you should make sure that you have vetted the other person very well and then have them run that team. Does that make sense? So there's no single right answer. So there's certain cases when you're like, I need to learn that skill because it's actually very important for me. In other cases, we're like, I do not need to learn that skill at all, and somebody else should do it. And so, for example, I know that I'm not good at web design and like creating websites, so I don't spend any time on that. And I have somebody else who just does the entire thing. And I said, you're running with it. I have some input on the design, but you do this. Like on the investment committee, like I decide the investments. Does that make sense? So, okay.
Didn't know if you'd like to ask another question. One more question?
Well, there seems to be at least one more question. Maybe let's try one more question from the audience.
Okay, one more question.
But my last question will be, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self, like back when you were at Berkeley? So let's say that for the last.
Hi, my name is Heather. I'm an EECS major, and my question is regarding emerging trends in the tech space. Do you have any like hot takes? Maybe like, is there an opinion you have that differs from like others?
So the hot takes or like opinions that differ from others, I wouldn't say this opinion is hugely different than others, but typically in the AI, in the emerging AI space, the way that I think about it is that there has to be some sort of durable advantage. In the sense that if you and 5 others do exactly the same thing, how will it be that it won't be commoditized and the margins will go to 0? And so typically what that looks like is you have some proprietary data set that nobody else has. So you have the ability to either learn or create based off of that data set, or you have some sort of network effect that happens, or you have some sort of usage graph that locks you in. So that's kind of like our view on it. I wouldn't say that that's too controversial. But I would say that it is important from an investment standpoint. The controversial points of view would be, like if you asked me this question 3 or 4 years ago, oh, actually, I can still say it now. So we think that AR, VR is a myth. So it's like not a thing in the sense that all these companies are saying AR, VR, it's like the next Android. No, it's not. Okay, so how many people here have gotten LASIK? Too young. How many people here know people that have gotten LASIK? Okay. Do people know how much LASIK costs? Okay, so it's thousands of dollars. Okay, so and then do people know what are the most serious effects of side effects of LASIK? Does anybody know? What's that? Well, the side effect, yeah, like side effect. Well, one of the worst side effects is you go blind. Like you can actually have real material problems. So the analogy that we talk about AR, VR is that people pay thousands of dollars and risk going blind or like having vision problems so they don't have to wear glasses. So what makes you think someone's going to put this thing on their face and walk around that's super inconvenient unless it is 10x better than the thing that they're holding in their hand at 1, 2, 3 things that are really, really important to them. Until that happens, the headsets will continue to be cool, like cool and fun, but they'll be like Nintendo and Sega, which are big companies or big products, but they are not Android. They're not Apple. Does that make sense? They're like 2 orders of magnitude apart in the sense of the distribution. One's like a video game company, and the other is like the operating system for all humanity. The other thing that's controversial is we think that crypto is a myth. I don't know that that's too controversial anymore, but like the coins themselves, useful, but largely most of crypto is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
Cool. All right. Any last advice you would have given yourself as a 20-year-old?
Yeah, the things as a 20-year-old is that I'm sure you've heard this before, which is like these things are not linear. Has anybody heard that expression, like things are non-linear? And that's especially true in your career. And so it's very hard because when you graduate, you have all your friends. Like in in school, you always are comparing with your colleagues, like, would you get on the exam? Would you get on the exam? I got this, da, da, da. And so you kind of have this, like, this comparison attitude for a very long time of, like, which number are you in the class? Like, how did you do on the midterm? Da, 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 da. But these things are nonlinear, meaning that careers are nonlinear, money making is nonlinear, like all of these things are completely nonlinear. So really don't index yourself off of these other people. You really have to do what really you want to do and you really love. And if you prioritize, if making money is important to you, it's fine. If social impact is important to you, fine. But making sure that you understand these things are nonlinear. So.
Normally I don't make a prediction, but I am going to go ahead and make a prediction that this is probably the single most important lecture that you will hear in your career here at Berkeley. So I want to thank the Dean. I want to thank Ben Ling. I can't wait to see what's next. Maybe a cabinet position, not sure.
You? For her.
Well, yeah, that I know. I know she'll be in Washington. It's true. She is actually going to be in Washington.
Yeah.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.